Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Alley Cat Creations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work, epiphany, a mind explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, artwork to create, please support my channel. All the links are at the bottom of the description. Alley Cat Creations211 is where you can find all kinds of artwork, including pyramids, healing pyramids, protection pyramids, EMF protection pyramids, patriotic skulls, hearts, floral hearts. And I have a whole lot more pyramids behind me. Patenceps. No, so much more. So check out my website. And if you're interested in anything, please email me. That's the best way you can get into contact with me. And I do everything privately anyway. So check me out. And my email is in the links. And lastly, 3D tier 1, only one tier. 3D memberships is a great way to contribute and give back to the channel and myself, but also a thanks to you guys. Once a month, I do a raffle and I give free entries to every channel member. So who knows, you might win something. And this month, because of Memorial Day, we'll be doing a patriotic themed art piece of artwork that I will be raffling off, probably one of these skulls, maybe a heart. I'm working hard on them. So check out the community tab for more information in the next few days. Just keep your eyes open. I didn't post anything just yet. I'm still pondering which one. And the ones that I've got going. Um, I also do channel member only video content. So mostly it's oracle readings, but I am working in the background on a few things. So we'll see what happens. Today we are reading the Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. Finally, stanza 11. Let's hope we don't have to part this a million times. Probably. The civilization and destruction of the fourth and fifth races. This is very eye-opening, I'm sure. I never read this. I'm reading it with you. This is like a reaction to books, but I'm very in alignment with a lot of her work. So if you want to get a sip, just be mindful for the new people that are joining the channel. I have dyslexia, so I can read. It's just sometimes things are just not perfect. I also have a really bad bridge. I need a lot of dental work and I have a lot of mouth issues. So there are going to be words, the Indian pronunciation of names and things that will not come out of my mouth. And I'm not here to embarrass myself. I'm not here to disrespect a culture, race, or creed with any of the frustrations that come up during my readings. So I just want to put that out there. And allergies, mind you. So here we go. The Lemuro Atlanteans built cities and spread civilization, the incipient stage of anthropomorphism. Their statuses, witnesses to the size of the Lemurio Atlanteans. Lemuria destroyed by fire, Atlantis by water. The flood. The destruction of the fourth race of the last antediluvian monster animals. They, the Lemurians, built huge cities of rare earths and metals they built. Out of the fires, lava vomited. Out of the white stone of the mountains, marble, and the black stone of the subterranean fires, they cut their own images in their size and likeness and worshiped them. As the history of the first two human races, the last of the Lemurians and the first of the future Atlanteans proceeds, we have at this point to blend the two and speak of them for a time collectively. Here, reference is also made to the divine dynasties, such as were claimed by the Egyptians, Chaldeans, Greeks, to have preceded their human kingdoms. They are still believed in by the modern Hindus and are enumerated in their sacred books, but of these we shall treat in their proper place. What remains to be shown is that our modern geologists are now being driven into admitting the evident existence of submerged continents, but to confess their presence is not to accept that they were men on them during the early geological periods. Men in civilized nations, not Paleolithic savages only, who under the guidance of their divine rulers built large cities, cultivated arts and sciences, and knew astronomy, architecture, and mathematics to perfection. This primeval civilization did not, as one may think, immediately follow their physiological transformation. Between the final evolution and the first city built, many hundreds of thousands of years had passed. Yet we find the Lemurians in their sixth sub-race building their first rock cities out of the stone and lava. One of such great cities of primitive structure was built entirely of lava, some 30 miles west from where Easter Island now stretches its narrow piece of sterile ground, and was entirely destroyed by a series of volcanic eruptions. The oldest remains of Cyclopean buildings were of all the handiwork of the Lemurians of the last sub-races, and an occultist shows, therefore, no wonder on learning that the stone relics found on the small piece of the land called Easter Island by Captain Cook are very much like the walls of the temple of Pachacamac or the ruins of Teotihuacan. Hunico, maybe, in Peru. And that they are in the Cyclopean style. The first large cities, however, appeared on the region of the continent which is now known as the island of Madagascar. There were civilized people and savages in those days, as they are now. Evolution achieved its work of perfection with the former, and karma its work of destruction on the latter. The Australians and their like are the descendants of those who, instead of vivifying the spark dropped into them by the flames, extinguish it by long generations of bestiality. The Aryan nations could trace their descendants through the Atlanteans from the more spiritual races of the Lemurians, in whom the sons of wisdom had personally incarnated. It is with the advent of the divine dynasties that the first civilizations were started, and while in some regions of the earth a portion of mankind preferred leading a nomadic and patriarchal life, and in others savage man was hardly learning to build a fire and to protect himself against the elements, his brothers more favored than he by their karma, and helped by the divine intelligence which informed them, built cities, and cultivated arts and sciences. Nevertheless, the civilization notwithstanding, while their pastoral brethren enjoyed wondrous powers as their birthright, they, the builders, could now obtain theirs only gradually. Even these beings generally used for power over physical nature and selfish and unholy purposes. Civilization has ever developed the physical and intellectual at the cost of the psychic and spiritual. The command and the guidance over his own psychic nature, which foolish men now associate with the supernatural, were with early humanity innate and congenital, and came to man as naturally as walking and thinking. There is no such thing as magic philosophies. She, the author, forgetting that magic in her early day still meant the great science of wisdom, and that Ashia could not possibly know anything of the modern perversion of thought, though there is still a thing as knowledge of the secret of nature. but they have become secrets only in our race and were public property with the third. Gradually, mankind went down in stature, for even before the real advent of the fourth or Atlantean race, the majority of mankind had fallen into inequity and sin, save the hierarchy of the elect, the followers and disciples of the sons of will and yoga, called later the sons of the fire mist. Then came the Atlanteans, the giants, whose physical beauty and strength reached their climax in accordance with evolutionary law toward the middle period of their fourth subrace. But as said in the commentary, the last survivors of the Fairchild of the White Island, the primitive Sveta Dwarpa, had perished ages before. Their Lemuria's elect and have taken shelter on the sacred island, now the fabled Shambhala, in the Gobi Desert, while some of their accursed race, separating from the main stock, now live in the jungles and underground cavemen, when the golden yellow race, the fourth, became in its turn black with sin. From pole to pole, the earth had changed her face for the third time, and was no longer inhabited by the sons of Sveta Dwarpa, the blessed, and I'm not going to get that word. East and west, the first, the one, and the pure had become corrupted. The demigods of the third had made room for the semi-demons of the fourth race, Sveta Dwarpa, whose northern parts of the Toya Booty, the seven Kumaras, Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, Santa Kumara, Jata, Vudhu, and Pan not gonna get that last part, had visited agreeably with exoteric tradition. The White Island had veiled her face. Her children now live on the Black Land, wherein later on Diatius, whatever, from the seventh Dwarpa, and Rakshas from the seventh climate replaced the sadhus and the ascetics of the third age, who had descended to them from another and higher regions. Like I said from the beginning of the video, it is evident that, taken in their dead letter, the Puran is read as an absurd tissue of fairy tales and no better. But if one reads chapters 1, 2, and 3 from Book 2, Volume 2 of Vishnu Purana and accepts verbatim its geography, geodesy, and ethnology in the matter of Priyavarta, however you pronounce these names, 7 sons, among whom the father divides the 7 Dwarpas, continental islands, and then proceeds to study how the eldest son, the king of Jambu Dwarpa, Agnidra, appointed Jambu Dwarpa among his 9 sons, and then how Nabi, his son, who had 100 sons, and appropriated all of these in his turn. Then the reader is likely to throw the book away and pronounce it a fargo of nonsense. But the esoteric student will understand that in the days when the Puranas were written, the true meaning was clear only to the initiated Brahmins, who wrote those books allegorically and would not give the whole truth to the masses. And he will explain to the Orientalists, who, beginning with Colonel Wilford and ending with Professor Weber, made and still are making such a mess of it, that the first 3 chapters purposely confuse the following subjects and events. The series of Kaplas, or ages, also races, are never taken into account. Events which have happened in one being allowed to stand along with those which took place in another. The chronological order is entirely ignored. This is shown by several of the Sanskrit commentators who explain the incapability of events and calculations in saying, whenever any contradictions in different Puranas are observed, They are ascribed to differences of kaplas and the like. The several meanings of the words Manvarata and kapla, or age, are withheld, and the general one only given. In the genealogy and geography of the kings and their Vrashas, countries, and Dwarpas, they are all allowed to be regarded as terrestrial regions. Now the truth is that without entering into 2-minute details, it is easy and permissible to show that the 7 Dwarpas apportioned to Priyavrata's sepentary progeny refer to several localities. First of all, to our planetary chain. Jambu Dwarpa, alone representing our globe. The 6 others are the to us invisible companion globes of this earth. This is shown by the very nature of the allegorical and symbolic descriptions. Jambu Dwarpa is in the center of all these, the so-called insular continents, and is surrounded by a sea of salt water. Lavana, whereas Plaksha Somalia, I don't know that's not how Somalia is spelled. Something like that. Kusa, Parancha, Saka, and Pushkara are surrounded severely by great seas of sugarcane juice, of wine, and clarified butter, of curds, of milk, and such like metaphorical names. This is shown further by Bhaskara Ashara, who uses expressions from the Secret Doctrine and its books in his description of the sidereal position of all these dwarpas. The Sea of Milk and the Sea of Curds, meaning the Milky Way and the various congeries of nebulae, the more so since he names the country to the south of the equator Loka, that to the north something Loka, Swara, Mahar, Jana, Tapo, and Satya Loka, and says those lokas are gradually obtained by increasing religious merits. They are various paradises. I'm going to put a pause here. So if we're having having trouble figuring out what that, look at the Kali Yuga cycles. Go look at maps of what the Kali Yuga is, and also the Norse. Manly P. Hall is a good depiction of it on the Secret World, the Secret Teachings. His book, it shows you the volumes of, like, Midgard is Earth, and then you have the other realms. Like, it's similar to that, but it's like flat Earth map-ish, but it levels. It's weird, but there's pictures out there to help you conceive this stuff. Pretty much. That the geological divisions of 7 allegorical continents, islands, mountains, seas, and countries does not belong only to our round, nor even to our races, the name of Bharata, Varasha, India, notwithstanding, is explained in the texts themselves by the narrator of the Vishnu Puran. Excuse me. For he closes the first chapter by saying, Bharata, the son of Nabhai, who gave his name to Bharata Varasha, or Idea, consigned the kingdom to his son Sumati, and abandoned this life at Salagrama. He was afterwards born again as a religious Brahmin in a distinguished family of ascetics. Under these princes, Baraha's descendants, Varasha, was divided into 9 portions, and their descendants held successfully possession of the country for 71 periods of the aggregate of the 4 ages, or the reign of Manu, representing a Maha Yuga of 4,320,000 years. But having said so much, Parasara suddenly explains that this was the creation of that sway long word name, Manu, by which the earth was peopled when he presided over the first Manvarata in the Kapla of Varaha. however you pronounce these words. The boar incarnation or avatar. Now every Brahmin knows that it is only with that long V name, Manu, that our humanity began as the earth or round. And if the Western reader turns to the subsection on the primeval manas of humanity, he will see that that long V name is the seventh of the 14 Manus who presided over our planetary chain during its life cycle, the representing or standing in every round for two manas of the same name, a root and a seed menu. He is the root menu of the fourth round, hence the seventh. Wilson finds in this only an incongruity and speculates that the patriarchal genealogies are older than the chronological system of Manvaradas and Kaplas, and thus have been rather clumsy distributed amongst the different periods. It is nothing of the kind. But as Orientalists know nothing of the secret teaching, they will take everything literally and then turn around and abuse the writers of that which they do not comprehend. These genealogies embrace a period of 3.5 rounds. They speak of pre-human periods and explain the descent into generation of every Manu. The first manifested sparks of the one unity and show, furthermore, each of these human sparks dividing into and multiplying by, first, the Piturs, the human ancestors, then by human races. No being can become God or Deva unless he passes through the human cycles. Therefore, the sloka says, happy are those who are born even from the latent condition of God, as men in Varasha, as that is the way to final liberation. In Jambu Dwarpa, Bharata is considered the best of its divisions because it is the land of works. In it alone, it is that the succession of 4 yuga ages, the Krita, the Treta, and the Dwapara, and Kali take place. When therefore her Sara, asked by Retta to give him the descriptions of the earth, returns again to the enumeration of the same Dwarpas with the same seas as those he had described in the Sway long name Mambarata. It is simply a blind, yet to him who reads between the lines, the 4 great races and the 5th are there. Their subdivisions, islands, continents, some of which are called by the names of celestial lokas and by those of other globes. Hence the confusion. All these are called by the Orientalists mythical and fabulous islands and lands. Very true, some are not of this earth, but they still exist. The White Island and Atala, at all events, are no myths, since the latter was the name contemptuously applied by the earliest pioneers of the 5th race to the land of Sin, Atlantis, in general, not to Plato's island alone. And since the former was the Sveta Dwarpa and Theogony, and Saka Dwarpa or Atlantis, its earlier portions, in its beginnings. This was when it yet had been its 7 holy rivers that washed away all sin, and its 7 districts, wherein there was no dereliction of virtue, no contention, no deviation from virtue, as it was then inhabited by the caste of the Magas, that caste which even the Brahmins acknowledged as not inferior to their own, and which was the nursery of the first Zarathustra. The Brahmins are shown consulting with, there's a really long G name that's not going to come out of me, on Narada's advice, who told them to invite the Magas as priests. Magas of the sun in the temple built by Samba, the reputed son of Krishna, who in reality had none. In this, the Puranas are historical allegory, notwithstanding, and occultism is stating facts. The whole story is told in another name I cannot pronounce, Purana. It is stated that having been cured by Sura, the sun, of leprosy, Samba, having built a temple dedicated to the sun, was looking for pious Brahmins to perform the appointed rites in it and received donations made to the god. But Narada, the virgin ascetic, whom one finds in every age in the Puranas, advised him not to do so, as Manu forbade the Brahmins to receive emoluments for the performance of religious rites. He therefore referred Samba to a long G name, Whiteface, the Purohata, or family priest of another one I cannot pronounce, king of Mathura, who would tell him who he could best employ. The priest directed Samba to invite the Magas, the worshippers of Sura, to discharge the duty, ignorant of the place they lived in. It is Sura, the sun himself, who directs Samba to Ska Dwarpa, beyond the salt water. Then Samba performs the journey using Garuda, however you pronounce that, Vishnu and Krishna's vehicle, the great bird, who lands him among the Magas. Very interesting. Now Krishna, who lived 5,000 years ago, and Narada, who is found reborn in every cycle or race, besides Garuda, the symbol esoterically of the great cycle, show the allegory. Yet the Magas are the Magi of Chaldea, and their class and worship were born on the earlier Atlantis in Sarka Dwarpa, the sinless. All the Orientalists are agreed that the Magas of Sarka Dwarpa are the forefathers of the fire-worshipping Parisis. Our quarrel with them rests, as usual, on their dwarfing hundreds of thousands to a few centuries this time. They carry the event, Narada and Samba, notwithstanding, to the days of the flight of the Parsis to Gujarta, however you say that one, which is simply absurd, as that was in the 7th century of our era. Though the Magas in the Bhavishya Purana, I'm butchering shit right here, so sorry guys, it's getting frustrating, are credited with this still living in Saka Dwarpa in the day of Krishna's sun, yet the last of it, Plato's Atlantis, had perished 6,000 years before. They were Mag, late of Sarka Dwarpa, and lived in those days in Chaldea. This is an intentional confusion again. The earliest pioneers of the fourth race were not Atlanteans, nor yet the human Asuras and the Rakshas, which they became later. In those days, large portions of the future continent of Atlantis were yet part and parcel of the ocean floors. Lemuria, as we have called the continent of the third race, was then a gigantic land. It covered the whole area of space from the foot of the Himalayas, which separated it from the inland sea, rolling its waves over what is now Tibet, Mongolia, in the great desert of Shamo, the Gobi, from Chittagong westward to Hardwar and eastward to Assam. From thence it stretched south across what is known to us as southern India, Ceylon, and Sumatra, then embracing on its way as we go south Madagascar on its right hand and Australia and Tasmania on its left. It ran down within a few degrees of the Antarctic Circle. When from Australia, an inland region on the mother continent in those ages, it extended far into the Pacific Ocean, not only beyond Rapa Nui, Easter Island, which now lies in latitude 26 south and longitude 110 west. This statement seems corroborated by science, even if only partially, as when discussing continental trends and showing the infra-Arctic masses tending generally with the meridian, several ancient continents are generally mentioned through infinitely, among such the God, I can't with these pronunciated words. Mascarene continent, which included Madagascar, stretching north and south, is spoken of, and the existence of another ancient continent running from Spitsbergen to the Stratus of Dover, while most of the other parts of Europe were sea bottom, it's taught. The latter corroborates then the occult teaching, which shows the now polar regions as the earliest of the seven cradles of humanity and as a tomb of the bulk of mankind, that the region during the third race, when the gigantic continent of Lemuria began separating into smaller continents. This is due, according to the explanation in the commentaries, to a decrease of velocity in the Earth's rotation. When the wheel runs at the usual rate, its extremities, the poles, agree with the middle circle equator. When it runs slower and tilts in every direction, there is a great disturbance on the face of the earth. The waters flow toward the two ends, and new lands arise in the middle belt, equatorial lands, while those at the ends are subject to paralyas by submersion. And again, thus the wheel of the earth is subject to and regulated by the spirit of the moon for the breath of its waters tides. Toward the close of the capilla of a great root race, the regions of the moon, the Pitar fathers, or Pitris, begin drawing harder, thus flatten the wheel about its belt. When it goes down in some place and swells in others, and the swelling runs toward the extremes, poles, new lands will arise and the old ones will be sucked in. We have but to read astronomical and geological works to see the meaning of the above very clearly. Scientists, modern specialists, have ascertained the influence of the tides on the geological distribution of land and water on the planets, and the shifting of the oceans with the corresponding subsidence and rise of a continent of new lands. Science knows, or thinks it knows, that this occurs periodically. Professor Todd believes he can trace a series of oscillations backward to the periods of the Earth's first incrustation. Therefore, it seems easy for science to verify the esoteric statements. We propose to treat of this at greater length in addenda. It is asked by some theosophicists, what will Atlantis be like when raised? The understanding from a few words in esoteric Buddhism, that all continents that have been submerged will reappear. Here again, there is a slight misconception. Were the same identical lands of Atlantis that were submerged to be raised again, then they would indeed be barren for ages, because the Atlantis sea bottom is covered with some 5,000 feet of chalk at present, and more is forming a new crustaceous formation of strata. In fact, is no reason why, when the time for a new continent is to appear and arrives, a geological convulsion and uprising of the sea bottom should not dispose of these 5,000 feet of chalk for the formation of some mountains, and 5,000 more come to the surface. The racial cataclysms are not a Noah's deluge of 40 days and kind of Bombay monsoon. That the periodical sinking and reappearance of the mighty continents now called Atlantis and Lemuria by the modern writers is no fiction, and to be demonstrated in this section, in which all the proofs of the same have been collated together. The most archaic Sanskrit and Tamali works teem with references to both continents. The seven sacred islands, Dwarpas, are mentioned in the Surah Siddhanta the oldest astronomical work in the whole world, and its works of Ashura Maya, the Atlantean astronomer, whom Professor Weber has made and reincarnated in Ptolemy. Yet it is a mistake to call these sacred islands Atlantean, as done by us, for like everything else in the Hindu sacred books, they are made to refer to several things. The heirloom left by Priyavat, however you say those names, the son of the Sway and that big name, Menu, to his 7 sons was not Atlantis, even though 1 or 2 of these islands survived the substance of their fellows and offered shelter ages later to the Atlanteans, whose continent had been submerged in its turn. When originally mentioned by Parasara, Vishnu Purana, the 7 referred to an esoteric doctrine, which is explained further on. Of all the 7 islands, Jambu Dwarpa is the only one that is terrestrial, for it is our globe. In the Puranas, every reference to the north of Meru is connected with the primeval El Dorado, now the North Pole region, which when the Mongolia blossomed, there were now, we see, an unexplored endless desert of ice, was then a continent again. Science speaks of an ancient continent which stretched from Spitsbergen down to the stratus of Dover. The Secret Doctrine teaches that in the earliest geological periods, these regions formed a horseshoe-like continent whose one end, the eastern, far more northward than northern Cornwall, included Greenland and other contained the Bering Straits as an inland piece of ground and descended southward in its natural trend down to the British Isles, which in those days must have been right under the lower curve of the semicircle. This continent, sorry guys, my eyes are itchy, was raised simultaneously with the submersion of the equatorial portions of Lemuria. Ages after, some of the Lemurian remains reappeared again on the face of the oceans. Therefore, though it can be said without departing from truth, that Atlantis is included in the 7 great insular continents, since the 4th race, Atlanteans, got some of the Lemurian relics and settling on the islands included them among their lands and continents. Yet a difference should be made and explanation given, once that a fuller and more accurate account is attempted, as in the present work. Easter Island was also taken possession of in this manner by some Atlanteans, who, having escaped from the cataclysms which befell their own land, settled on the remnant of Lemuria only to perish thereon when destroyed in one day by its volcanic fires and lava. This may be regarded as fiction by certain geographers and geologists. To the occultists, it is history. What does science know to the contrary? Until the appearance of a map published at Basel in 1522, wherein the name of America appears for the first time, the latter was believed to be part of India. Science also refuses to sanction the wild hypothesis that there was a time when the Indian Peninsula at one time of the line and South America at the other were connected by a belt of islands and continents. The India of the prehistoric ages was doubly connected with 2 Americas, the lands of the ancestors of those whom Ammonius Marcellinus calls the Brahmins of Upper India, stretched from Kashmir far into the now deserts of Shamo. A pedestrian from the north might have reached, hardly wetting his feet, the Alaskan Peninsula through Manchuria, across the future Gulf of Tartary, the Kuril and Aleutian Islands, while other traveler furnished with a canoe and starting from the south could have walked over the Siam, crossed the Polynesian Islands, and trudged into any part of the continent of South America. This was written from the words of a master, a rather doubtful authority for a materialist and skeptics. But here we have one of their own flock and a bird of the same feather, Ernest Haeckel, who, in his distribution of races, corroborates the statement almost verbatim. It would seem that the region on the Earth's surface where the evolution of those primitive men from the closely related Carterine apes took place must be sought either in southern Asia or eastern Africa, or in Lemuria. Lemuria is an ancient continent now sunk beneath the waters of the Indian Ocean, which, lying to the south of Asia of today, stretch on the one hand eastwards to Upper India and Sundra Island, on the other westward as far as Madagascar and Africa. In the epoch we are treating of, the continent of Lemuria had already broken asunder in many places and formed new separate continents. There was nevertheless neither Africa nor the Americas, still less Europe in those days, all these slumbering yet on the ocean floors, nor was there much of a present Asia, for the Cis-Himalayan regions were covered with seas, and beyond this stretch the lotus leaves of Sveta Dwarpa, the countries now called Greenland, eastern and western Siberia. The immense continent, which had once reigned supreme over the Indian Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, now consists of huge islands which were gradually disappearing one after the other until the final convulsion engulfed the last remains of it. Easter Isle, for instance, belongs to the earliest civilization of the third race. Submerged with the rest, a volcanic and sudden uplifting of the ocean floor raised a small relic of the archaic ages, untouched with its volcanic and statues during the Champlain epoch of northern polar submersion, as a standing witness to the existence of Lemuria. It is said that some of the Australian tribes are the last remnants of the last descendants of the third race. Very interesting. In this way are again corroborated to a degree by materialistic science. Haeckel, when speaking of Blumenbach's brown or Malay race, and the Australians and Papuans, remarks there is much likeness between these last and the Aborigines of Polynesia, that Australian island world that seems to have been once a time a gigantic and continuous continent. It certainly was, since it stretched during the third race, east and west, as far as where the two Americas now lie. And since the present Australia is but a portion of it, as are also a few surviving islands sown hither and thither on the face of the Pacific, and a large bit of California, which belong to it. Funnily enough, Haeckel, in his fantastic pedigree of man, considers the Australians of today as the lineal descendants, almost unchanged, of that second branch of the primitive human race that spread northwards at first chiefly in Asia from the home of man's infancy, and seems to have been the parent of all the other straight-haired races of men. The one woolly-haired migrated in part westwards to Africa and northwards to New Guinea, which countries had then, as said, not existed as yet. The other straight-haired was evolved further to the north in Asia and peopled Australia. Behold, writes a master, the relics of that once great nation, Lemuria, of the third race, and some of the flat-headed aborigines of your Australia, but they belong to the last remnants of the seventh subrace of the third. Proof. Haeckel must also have dreamt a dream and seen for once a true vision. It is to this period that we have to look for the first appearance of the ancestors of those who are termed by us the most ancient peoples of the world, now called respectfully the Aryan Hindus, the Egyptians, and the oldest Persians on the one hand, and the Chaldees and Phoenicians on the other. These are governed by the divine dynasties, kings and rulers who had of mortal man only his physical appearance as it was then, but who are beings from spheres higher and more celestial than our own sphere will be. Long Monveratus hence, It is useless, of course, to attempt to force their existence on skeptics. Their greatest pride consists in proving their patronymic denomination as Carthaginenses, which fact they try to demonstrate on the alleged authority of the coccyx appendage to their os sacrum, that rudimentary tail which, if they only had it long enough, they would wag it in joy and forever in honor of its eminent discoverer. These will remain as faithful to their ape ancestors as Christians will to tailless Adam. The Secret Doctrine, however, sets right on the point Theosophists and students of occult sciences. I'm going to leave it here. Sorry, I have a lot of buzzing going on in my ear. I'm going to leave it here, guys. Part one, here we are. Here we are. I'm in a lot of pain. I got to take some supplements and stretch. But I hope you guys enjoyed this part. This is interesting, even if you got lost with the names, and I did too. It's really talking about the land masses and how people have perceived the world and the continents and the races and a lot of things that if we really took a step back and appreciated what she was presenting, I even speak of this, like the Egyptians, after Atlantis sunk and they fled to Egypt, they were not human. None of them were human. If you look at all the statues, if you look at the archaeology in Egypt and some of the other countries, these things are humongous. And I call them things, they're beings. They're not human. So in what density, this is how I'm going to bring it down to layman's terms, in what density was this at? We have to remember that things happen in densities and dimensions. And even if you don't believe in the quantum physics, the quantum mechanics of the many worlds interpretation, you still have to ask yourself if they were giants, and she's talking about the different degrees of density and densities and the loci and the merging, submerging of parallel densities and universes and planets. It will all start making sense if you break it down into what dimensional space are we looking at? Are we speaking about? Was Adam and Eve even human? Or were they ethereal? Or were they less dense on a higher density before they came down to third density as humans? If they did. It's one to think and really ponder and question. And as we are ascending back up the ladder, we were the vegetable life. We are the vegetable life. We are the animal. We are the all that is. And in this consciousness, in this vehicle right now, we're ascending back up. So we learning the cycles, even if you don't believe in this particularly, it's just good perspective to take some notes on. Because I think she's spot on with a couple of things. I don't necessarily correlate with it all. But there's a lot to her work that if we took a step back and like analyze, she has some points there that you can't argue if you're in the spiritual metaphysical world. So it's really interesting. Yay, another Blavatsky reading that I have to write down. All right, so now I know where I'm stopping at. Sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within, be the shoulder, be the lighthouse, sprinkle and seed your truths, light that path forward, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your likes, shares, and subscribes. Thank you for all the help that you guys have given me. I am in midlife crisis mode and I'm trying not to freak out. So I'm just doing the best that I can in every moment that I can do it in. Until the next one, guys, thank you for watching. Have a blessed and beautiful day. Bye for now.